On today's show, the Atlanta Hawks go down 1-0 in the first round series against Boston after a calamitous first half. Improved second half, to be sure, but down 30 at the break. Not a whole lot the Hawks could have done after the halftime break to erase all of that. We'll get into all of what transpired, the game flow, takeaways, etc. All that and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1453 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Saturday evening into Sunday. And today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. If you're a first-time user with PrizePicks, get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That is PrizePicks.com, promo code Locked On. I also want to encourage you at the top of the podcast to make it your first listen each and every day. Check out the Locked On Hawks podcast anywhere you get your podcasts: Apple, Spotify, also on YouTube on the video side. And today's show will unsurprisingly get into what became a loss for the Hawks in game one of the first round series against Boston, 112-99. If you watch this game, obviously it was not quite as simple as the final score would indicate. The Hawks were down by as many as 32 points. They were down 30 points at the half. That tied Boston's largest halftime lead in the playoffs in franchise history. And if you might know this, Boston has a lot of history to go back into. So it was a dominant first half from the Celtics, a horrible performance, honestly, from the Hawks before halftime, and basically every way. It was better after that. They got within 12 a few times in the second half. And in the fourth quarter, it wasn't any closer than that, but still the Hawks were not totally out of the game at any point until the very, very end. So there were some positive things to get to along the way. And if you missed it also on Twitter, I revealed this. I was watching the game from a hospital. My sister-in-law is still, as we speak, in labor, hopefully to have their first child, my first nephew. So hopefully that's going to be going well in the coming hours. All that stuff. But we're going to be here for the podcast, and thank you for your patience as I was a little bit delayed as I usually would be, but obviously for a pretty good reason on this particular Saturday evening. As we always do, if you're new listener to the podcast, what we do here at the top of the show is give you some takeaways and broad observations from the contest. And then in the middle of the podcast, some of the game flow. It's kind of my more play-by-play kind of stuff, observations throughout the game, some highlight plays, etc. And then at the end of the podcast, a look at the individual player breakdowns and who performed well, who struggled, etc. And obviously, it was not the best night or afternoon at the office for the Hawks in this game. And given the margin, you can correctly guess that there was issues on both sides of the floor were pretty rough for the Hawks in this game. I'll start with the offense first. A 97 offensive rating for the game, and that actually came with the Hawks being pretty solid in the second half. So you can imagine how bad the first half was offensively for Atlanta in this game. And a natural place to start is the three-point shooting, where the Hawks were 5 of 29. And I got a lot of people kind of asking about this during and after the game as to like how much of the Hawks losing had to do with three-point variance. And my answer is some of that. Now, that was obviously a huge problem. The Hawks are going to have to shoot better than this to win the series. That's not a huge mystery, obviously. 17% from three on reasonable volume is not great. It's been an issue all season long. The Hawks have shot the ball better in the second half of the season, but volume and accuracy have been bad for the Hawks this year. They're in the bottom 6, 7, 8 of the league in those categories. They picked a bad time for a bad shooting night, but also it was not their only problem, nor was it even maybe their biggest problem. Some of it was on offense for sure, but the first half offense we'll come back to later on even more, but it was basically bad at everything other than kind of offensive rebounding. Everything else was really bad in that first half. When you factor in the second half, it was like the supporting numbers look a lot better for Atlanta. Obviously, the top line efficiency is not good. Scored 99 points in a pretty fast possession game is not great. But 11 turnovers, 14 offensive rebounds in the game. And I talked about this a lot with Glenn Willis on the show a couple days ago, as well as Tower Jones, John Corrales, etc. The Hawks are going to have to win the possession battle in this series, and they actually did that in this game. Now, a lot of that was the second half for sure, but the Hawks ended up taking more shots than the Celtics did in this game. The problem is the shooting splits were so far in Boston's direction that it was too far to overcome. But there was a little bit of positivity there in the way the Hawks always controlled the possession battle in this game, not turning the ball over. And rebounding-wise, it wasn't dominant, but they kind of did their job on the offensive glass in this game. But look, it's going to be hard to win if the Hawks cannot make shots. That's not breaking news to anyone, and hopefully they have a better shooting night in game two. Defensively, same kind of thing. I'll give the caveat that the full game numbers look pretty decent, honestly, because of the fact that defensively in the second half, things were pretty good. Ended up with a 110 defensive rating in this game. That's very good against this Boston offense. that was helped a lot, unquestionably, by Boston not playing well at all in the second half of this game. In fact, Boston scored 38 points in the second half. For comparison, that's obviously very low, but in comparison, they scored 45 points in the second quarter alone. So the gas tank went to empty for Boston in the second half, and they shot 35% from the floor, 4-17 from three in the second half. So part of that was the defense was legitimately better from the Hawks, for sure. They were more attentive, they were more physical, they were all of those things. And part of that, I have to say, is Boston letting down a little bit. I mean, obviously, it's tough to quantify just how much of that was the case, but it's natural to be up by 30 points at the half and kind of realize this game is probably over and kind of pull back a little bit. That happened a little bit in this game, but we'll see how much it was as far as like game 2 and beyond. We'll talk about the first half later defensively, which was quite bad. But for the full game, the numbers again look pretty solid. They did a good job, I think, at times preventing three-point attempts in this game. Boston went to 33 shots from three-point range. That's a very low number for Boston. Also, more physicality in the second half in general. They could find some solace in that if you want to. They were plus 12 in the paint in the second half. That's a very helpful number. They forced 17 turnovers in the game. That's a very solid figure for the Hawks. If they do that again, that'll probably be a pretty good position. And Boston's going to make shots. The Hawks cannot get overwhelmed by that. I have to say, though, it was not just shooting luck. Clearly, the big swing, if you look at the numbers in this game, was that Boston outshot Atlanta pretty significantly. Part of that is a credit to them. Part of that is the Hawks, some variance, missing a bunch of shots. But it does have to do with defense, especially in the first half. Part of the reason why Boston was able to do what they were able to do in the first half was that the Hawks were giving up layups. And I mean really layups. The point of attack defense for the Hawks in the first half in particular was ghastly. First quarter, people that I trust nationally, they're not like diehards into the Hawks every single night, but they're observing this game in a smart, high-level way, and they're just like almost aghast by how bad the Hawks defense was in the first quarter, especially, but even beyond that in the second half. Now, the second quarter, the Hawks were victimized by Boston making a bunch of shots. So as far as why the margin ballooned to 30, some of that is that Boston did get hot in the second quarter, but the Hawks did not do their jobs defensively in the first half. Now, it was better in the second half. If you want to find that sort of solace there, but overall, this is the game where the Hawks were big underdogs. We should say that now. I know I was probably a little bit higher on the Hawks' chances to be competitive in this series than some. That I still feel okay about that. Obviously, not the greatest start in the world in the first half with regard to that prediction to have the Hawks make this a little bit longer of a series. But our friends at FanDuel, who are, of course, the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network, they made the Hawks a 10-point underdog in this game. That's a very, very large number. In fact, that is the Hawks only had one game all year long where they were that big of an underdog. And it was the second night of a back-to-back in Denver, and they were not full health in that game. So for the Hawks to be full strength, no injuries at all, normal rest, and to be a 10-point underdog tells you how good Boston is and how important this game is, obviously being treated. It's playoff games, etc. It's a different animal. But the Hawks were supposed to lose this game, obviously on paper. I thought they had a chance to kind of hit them in the mouth early on. They did the absolute opposite of that, so that was not great. But, it is what it is on that front. We'll get into kind of how the game flow went in a second, how bad the first half was, how good the second half was in comparison. But one more thing. Look, the first half was legitimately disappointing and pretty hideous. Now, you can sort of leave that there, and I would be okay with that. If that's what your reaction was to this game, is like you turn it off at halftime and you're just so frustrated. I understand all of that. I will give the Hawks some credit, though, for not rolling over. That's a positive sign. I think you have to see that maybe some stuff woke up in the second half and what they're going to have to do to compete in this series. It's still a game in which they trail by double figures for basically the entire game. So there's some room to be optimistic if you want to about the second half, how they responded, or pessimistic based on the first half and the fact that they were not really in this game for the majority of the afternoon. So we'll leave it there for now. But a bad first half performance that cannot be overlooked by any stretch of the imagination. But fortunately, they'll have one more chance to kind of steal a split on Tuesday when they return to Boston and face them again Tuesday night at the Garden. Okay, we'll get into kind of the game flow as it went in this contest. But first, a word from our sponsors on today's show. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. If you're into fantasy sports like I am, make sure you check out the award-winning app at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. It's amazing. I know that you will love it as well. It's so very easy to use. I've been playing on PrizePicks for quite some time now. It's really a breeze to operate. All you have to do is pick 2 to 6 players and actually choose whether they have more or less than a certain number of points or rebounds or assists, steals, etc. And at PrizePicks, more than 25 times the money on your entries. They offer numbers on any sport you can think of and potentially enjoy as well. And that includes, of course, the NBA and college basketball, the NFL, college football, MLB, NHL, PGA, soccer, esports, and much more. And a whole entry can be done just a minute or less. It's that easy and that quick. Plus, it's just you against the numbers. They have safe and fast withdrawals at PrizePicks, and they're operating in more than 30 states at this point, including Georgia, as well as Canada. On the PrizePicks app right now, on PrizePicks.com, to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. If you're a first-time user, get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. Don't forget that promo code. It is locked on, and sign up for instant deposit match up to $100. Check it out now at PrizePicks. All right, we'll dive in now to the game flow. And as usual for the Hawks, same starting lineup. Boston stayed with their unit they were using late in the season with Al Horford plus 4 perimeter guys. So they went small in general. Now, Robert Williams, their backup, who was usually their starting center at one point, played 22 minutes. He was fine in this game. So they played 8 guys. I was surprised for Boston to not play Grant Williams at all. It was Sam Hauser as the 8th man. That's a little bit of a surprise. The Hawks played 9 guys, unsurprisingly, in this one. On the other end of the floor, though, the Hawks had some interesting matchups. Like, they had Hunter on Tatum for the most part early on, Collins on Smart, Trae Young and Derek White, DeJounte Murray on Jaylen Brown, etc. No great matchups there for the Hawks, but you kind of have to do what you have to do. I thought the Hawks might have been a little bit surprised, perhaps, that Boston played a lot of drop coverage in the first half. Usually Boston is predicated on their switching, and in this game, they were much better in drop than they were in switches. And I wonder if that was by design, but we'll come back to that later on. I thought the Hawks were pretty fortunate to be only down by 4 points at the first timeout in the middle of the first quarter. They had a bad turnover to start the game. They were 4-13 from the floor in the first quarter start. And 2 of those makes were DeJounte mid-rangers that were not great shots. Honestly, Trae was 0 of 6 to start the game, 2 turnovers. Like, he was pressing a little bit. It felt like Hunter was really bad in the first half, especially. And then defensively, they allowed, I think, 3 or 4 pretty easy layups in the first 6-7 minutes. It was pretty rough. Breaking down the perimeter. And if you're a new listener, you might not know this or have paid attention all year long, but the Hawks' number one issue in my mind all season long has been perimeter defense and point of attack defense. And that was definitely the case. For as bad as the offense was in the first half, and it was bad, the defense at the point of attack in the first quarter was just ghastly. It was they cannot do that and basically even hang around games, much less win them. So that was on display. Rotationally, no huge surprises. In fact, that was exactly what you would have thought. It was Bogey, it was Bay, it was Okongwu, and Jalen Johnson as the bench in this lineup. Jalen had a rough first half, like a lot of guys did. He got blocked by Robert Williams at the rim right away and had a turnover alongside Trae. The Hawks were down 10 at the end of the first quarter. Defensively, again, kind of a mess. And then offensively, it was ghastly. They had 19 points on 28 possessions. That is really bad. They were 0-9 from 3 in the first quarter. Trae actually made one, but got waved off for an offensive foul, so that would make it even look even worse than that. They were 9 of 25 from the field with 5 turnovers in the first quarter, 19 points, and you're suddenly in a 10-point hole against a team that's better than you on the road. Not where you want to be. Then things got worse in the second quarter. There was a nice live ball steal by Jalen Johnson early in the quarter for a dunk, and he got a nice anticipation steal moments later after that. So it was pretty good activity from Jalen defensively, and the Hawks were doing well on the glass for a little while, but then Boston broke it open in a big way. First, it was a 10-1 run to go up by 17 mid-quarter. Trae had a bad turnover and a bad pull-up 30-footer that he missed. And I thought it was stark to me anyway that Boston was totally ignoring Jalen Johnson. And that was the right move. Jalen, as far as good as he is and as far as intriguing as he is and as talented as he is, his shooting is going to be ignored, it seems like, in the series. And by the way, if I was Boston, I would also ignore his shooting. And that made their life a lot easier defensively because I think the Hawks knew it. They took him out right after that, after there were 3 or 4 possessions kind of in a row where it was so obvious that they were just going to leave him wide open and he couldn't make them pay. The Hawks just couldn't score still early on in the second quarter. And then that run that was 10-1 became a 20-3 overall push to go from the Hawks being down by 8 to being down by 25. They missed 9 shots in a row. They were 1 of 15 from 3 at that point. Yes, 1 of 15 from 3. And not to pile on, there were a lot of guys who struggled. Trae was really bad in the first half, but DeAndre Hunter in his first 13 minutes had 0 points, 0 rebounds, 0 assists, and was getting cooked by Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. That is really rough. Obviously, Hunter is not a guy who I would call like a lockdown defender, but I think he's a pretty good defensive player on the wing, and he is, almost more importantly for the Hawks, their best defender on the wing, and he was one of the guys getting cooked, and that's obviously not great. He was better in the second half, but it was really bad early on. Okongwu got a bad foul early on as well, and I pointed out in real time on Twitter that was a play he can't make. He kind of got beat by an up and under by Derek White, and the reason why he can't have that foul is because within 5 minutes after that, he had 3 fouls. And Okongwu is always in foul trouble, and that happened again in this game. They were down 27 after 20 minutes. I pulled some stats during a stoppage where they were, again, down by 27 points after 20 minutes of play. They had a 71 offensive rating at that point. That is hideous. And then a 131 defensive rating at that point. They were shooting 28% from the field after 20 minutes, 1 of 16 from 3 with 7 assists and 6 turnovers. That's terrible. Boston was shooting 6% from the floor. They were 5 of 5 to start the second quarter from three-point range, had 15 assists, and it got worse from there, actually, because they're down by 30 at the halftime break. Kind of a bit of nice synergy here. Both teams attempted 16 shots from three-point range in the first half. Boston made 9, Atlanta made 1. There you go. Now, it was not all that by any means, but on the bright side, you could say the Hawks were holding them in check from taking a ton of threes, because usually Boston attempts a lot more than that. But the problem was the Hawks were allowing layups instead. And obviously the Hawks would not normally shoot 1 of 16 from 3, but even if they were, let's say, 5 of 16, they would have been down 15 points. It wasn't just that. The Hawks also had a deficit in points in the paint in the first half, which just can't happen in the series. So it was all over the place. I said my piece a number of times already on this podcast, but the first half was just unacceptably bad. They all know that, but it was glaring. It was not a lot of fun. After halftime, the game was not over, but obviously they're in a big hole. They came out with DeJounte on the ball early on, which I thought was interesting. They had one 8-0 run to get back to 24, and that was their best stretch of the game at that point in time. And of course, Boston scored the next 8 points right back. They were 1 of 18 from 3 at one point. So actually, the Hawks were 4 of their last 11, which is actually pretty solid, but 1 of 18 is tough. I thought Hunter was more engaged and aggressive after halftime. He's not alone by any means, but maybe he got like a little bit of a talking to at halftime break because he was so bad in the first half. They got it down to 19 at the end of the third quarter. They won the quarter by 11 points. That doesn't get you a ton, honestly, but it was something they could at least take some solace in. Jalen played better. He was driving and dunking and being more aggressive. Boston wasn't guarding him still, but he at least made a jump shot when he was wide open to take one. Also, Boston went to more switching defensively. I think probably because they were trying to take some energy off the table, and the Hawks were attacking effectively against those looks. The Hawks were 54% from the floor in the third quarter, so they were much better there. And then after a 9-0 run early in the fourth quarter, that was a 32-12 overall push from the Hawks. In the game, they lost by 13 points. They had an extended run at 32-12. They had a 3 by Bogey, 3 by Bay, and then Bogey got to the rim and finished in transition. He had a very bad first half, like a lot of guys did, and that was better after halftime was Bogey. And they were done by 12 with 9:33 to go. Now, I'll be the first to tell you always that it takes a lot of effort to erase a deficit. So going from 30 down to 12 down is nice, but it's a lot harder to go from then 12 to take the lead. And that's where the Hawks just couldn't do it, which is not like a shot at them. They did a lot to cut the deficit in half. But after that, they had back-to-back empty trips after timeouts. There was a no call on a lob to Okongwu that might have helped there, but they missed 4 straight shots. Boston scored 3 times in a row. It was back to 18. And for me, it was pretty much over there. Now, the Hawks were back within 12 again a couple different times later in the fourth quarter. Interestingly, they actually had Trae Young at the table for part of a run, and then he actually didn't come back in right away, and then he came back in a little bit later than that. It was a little bit interesting to kind of see that back and forth. Hunter had a fast break down 13 when he probably should have passed the ball in the final minutes. He got blocked by Marcus Smart, etc. It was kind of rough. And, it got a little bit interesting, I'll say that, but it was not particularly competitive down the stretch still. And the one note from the fourth quarter was that Jalen Johnson left the game briefly with a knee injury of some kind, it seemed like, went to the locker room, came back pretty quickly, and Quinn said he was fine after the game. So we'll see if he's listed on the injury report for Tuesday, but hopefully the Hawks evaded damage there. But second half, again, much better. They actually outscored Boston by a 17-point margin in the second half. That's not really indicative, I don't think, of the entire way they played, but defensively they were much more engaged. Offensively they were better. So I'm sure Quinn will at least use that as some kind of motivation to be better in game 2. But we'll leave it there for now, and that's kind of how this thing sort of unfolded along the way. It wasn't pretty. They dug a huge hole. They were, I would say, admirable in climbing out of it, but still a lot of work to do for the Hawks as they look at game 2 and beyond. Okay, we'll have one more break. We'll come back with a breakdown of who played well, a small list of players, I will say, and then who struggled in this game, plus a brief look ahead at what's to come. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Today's show is brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious snack this time of year, you don't want to actually have all the sugar and calories that go along with that. Try the best tasting protein bar ever, and that is Built Bar. You have to try it right now, especially if you're like me and really like to try to have that good taste in addition to some healthy snack choices. Plus, it really has a total package for you. Built Bars and Built Puffs are healthy and tasty, and you won't be able to tell anything different about that. And in fact, they're actually good for you as well. If you're wondering what makes Built Bars so good, start with the fact that they're awesome to taste, but also they have 100% real chocolate on the outside. Yes, real chocolate on the outside, and they have a ton of flavors that you absolutely love. Huge variety that includes peanut butter brownie, cookies and cream. It's my personal favorite, of course, and many more options. I'm not really sure how Built Bar does it, to be honest with you, but Built Bars have 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar, plus a whopping 17 grams of protein in every bar. And you don't have to wait to get them as well. You can pick up a box right now at Walmart or Sam's Club, or you can still order from Built.com like you always have, like I've been telling you for a very long time. One more time, pick up some Built Bars right now at Walmart, Sam's Club, or Built.com and try Built Bar today. All right, we'll dive into the player evaluations now on the podcast. And as you might expect, not a whole lot of positivity here. We'll go to the bench as we always do. I thought Bogey in the second half was Bogey in a good way. First half, he's pretty invisible. That's unfortunate. When Bogey doesn't have it, he doesn't have it. But the second half, he was pretty good. 9 points, 4 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks for Bogey, which is interesting. 4 rebounds, I should say. 2 of 7 from 3, 3 of 10 from the field. He wasn't good, but he did have some Bogey flashes that were helpful in the third quarter. If they have that, that'd be very good for game 2 and beyond. Jalen Johnson, it was a roller coaster ride, like it kind of always is with Jalen, but I would say a little bit more on the low side than the high side in this one. He still made some nice flash plays. He had a steal, 6 rebounds, 6 points. He was physical. I think defensively, he did one of the better jobs on the Jays in this game, Tatum and Brown, but he was over-aggressive. He had 3 fouls in 13 minutes, a couple of really, really rough plays on offense. He was not being guarded again. So I will be interested to see if they have a more of a sort of a different plan for Jalen on offense in particular in game 2. But the highs are there, and I think in general in this series, you can't go away from him because the Hawks need that high variance. Obviously, they're the underdog in this series, and I think Jalen gives you the opportunity to kind of go out there and maybe dominate for 5 minutes in a way that other guys maybe not that are behind him. Sadiq Bey had a weird game. He was actually minus 12, which is the worst mark off the bench, but I thought he was probably one of the best bench players, honestly. 6 points, 4 rebounds, did have 3 assists and 2 steals. Didn't shoot it well in this game, and I think offensively was kind of a pretty big negative in some respects, but I thought he at least competed, which was stark. I think in the first half, he was one of the only guys that played hard and physically. He didn't play well, but he wasn't a disaster. Okongwu had a really rough game, and I was surprised by that. I think this is a good series for Okongwu on paper. I heard and saw people that I think are very smart kind of thinking out loud that Okongwu might be breaking out at this point in time. And he's been really good in the second half of the season. He was very bad in this game. 3 points, did have 5 rebounds, but all 5 were offensive. 0 defensive rebounds in 19 minutes is pretty bad. 3 fouls, 0-4 from the floor. Just a really rough, kind of no rhythm game from Okongwu. I'm not worried about it. I think he'll be good in game 2, and he's been playing great for a long time now, but it was a really rough one for him. To the starters, Collins was kind of the only bright spot, if you even want to call that. In the first half, he was kind of the only guy at halftime that I would have said played like even an average half. He wasn't fantastic, but at least he was kind of efficient. He ended up with 12 points, 2 blocks, 4 rebounds on 7 shots. I still think the Hawks should use him more often on offense, but I thought he was fine. He didn't play fantastically, but in the first half, he was like the only guy who wasn't terrible. Hunter, tail of 2 halves. I think he was still bad in this game. I'll just say that plainly. In the first half, it was really, really, really rough from Hunter. And I think the takes are too strong. I understand some of the negative reaction because he really was that bad in the first half tonight. I think Hunter gets a little bit too muchy sometimes. I think it's a little bit too much praise sometimes. But I think Hunter did respond, which was positive, but he has to be better. Now, that goes for a lot of guys on the roster. We'll get to more of them in a second with Trey, et cetera. But this is a series where against this opponent and Tatum and Brown, Hunter cannot be even average. He's got to be good for the Hawks, and he was bad in this game. And that was not that was not the only reason why they lost this game by any means. But I think that his first half was eyebrow-raisingly bad. So we'll see if he sort of responds like he did in the second half for a full game on Tuesday. I thought Capella was fine. 12 points, 8 rebounds, 6 of 8 from the floor. He had the best plus-minus other than Collins in the starting lineup. Didn't play great. I think that keeping him with Robert Williams is probably a good idea. Offensively, he does kind of hurt them a little bit with their lack of spacing as long as they're not. But it was a lot of 30s pretty effective, but I think the Hawks in this game might have liked to have gone more to Okongwu, but he was really struggling as well. So maybe some Collins at center lineups. We'll see. But I thought Clint was generally fine, nor was he fantastic. Murray took 25 shots, and I don't know how to feel about that, honestly. He had 24 points to lead the team in scoring, but he was 0-6 from 3, and he was 10 of 19 on twos. A lot of long twos from DeJounte, kind of an old school pull-up marathon from Murray in this game. The Hawks needed some volume from somebody in this one, so I'm not upset about that necessarily, but I thought Murray was not a huge positive, to say the least. He made some tough shots, had 6 assists, 1 turnover, so it wasn't like he was terrible, but defensively, he was not good, and that's been a theme all year long. I think Murray does make some plays. He had 3 steals. That's notable. People kind of remember that stuff, but on the ball, he struggled a lot. Now, in fairness to him, having him guard Jaylen Brown is not going to be fair to Murray. Like, he's not going to be able to hold him that matchup a lot, but I thought that he needed to be a little bit better there, and we'll see about the process offensively. And then Trey. Trey did not play well, to say the least. 16 points on 18 shots. He was 4 of 13 on twos. That's really rough. 1 of 5 from 3. It's been a theme for a while now. He's not been shooting the ball well at all. 5 turnovers is like not egregious for a player of his high usage, but not great. 8 assists is fine. He had 2 steals, but I think that to his credit, like a lot of guys, he settled down in the second half. He was better. He didn't shoot it well in the second half, but I thought his process was much better. He was more in control. His first quarter and a half, really rough. Like, basically between him and Hunter, I couldn't decide who was more damaging at times in the first half. That's not where you want to be, given how bad Hunter played. But they both got better, and I think that it's not a secret. This is obviously something I said a lot on the podcast leading up to the game one when I talked to Tyler and and Glenn, et cetera, in the last couple of days. Trey has to be not just okay, but like genuinely good in the series for the Hawks to have a chance, and he was not good in this game by his standards. Obviously, his standards are very high, but the first half he was like pretty rough. Second half better, but he's got to make shots. He was inefficient. And then defensively, it's not a secret, but Boston's going to go after him. They're not going to hide it. They're going to go after Trey as much as they possibly can. And I don't blame them for that. They probably should. And we'll see how sort of that gets responded to. And we'll leave it there for now. So I'll leave you with this. Our friends at FanDuel, at this point in time, make the Celtics, I should say, minus 3,000 favorites. If you don't understand betting odds, I'll just say this. That means you have to bet $30 on the Celtics to win $1. That means their basically implied odds are over 95% to win the series. Now, that is an overreaction. Now, playoff series are overreactions in general, but if the Hawks had lost this game by 5 points, it would not be that number. If the Hawks had not trailed by 30 at some point in this game, it wouldn't be that number. So I'm not telling you the Hawks are going to win the series. They're probably not going to win the series, but I think there were probably too many reactions. In fact, I know there were too many strong takes from the outside about how terrible the Hawks are, about how great the Celtics are. I get it. The first half was about as bad as the Hawks possibly could have played. So I'm not going to excuse that by any means. I do think, though, there was a little bit of knee-jerk and act like this series is going to all be this. I think the Hawks could seriously threaten on Tuesday. If they don't, then they're probably in trouble. But this is a one-game sample size. They were not good in the first half. They were better in the second half. We'll see if they respond. And game 2 is on Tuesday evening in Boston. 2 full days between games. I think with Snyder on the bench, you have more confidence in some adjustments being made. We'll see. One of those adjustments is just making shots that they can't really do anything about that other than just make them. But, basically this is one of those nights where you can see what you want to see. I think the Hawks could have some positive feelings coming out of this game based on their adjustments in the second half, the way they played. Or you could say, look, they got outclassed when Boston was trying. And I would agree with both those things. So a little bit of nuance is always important here. I think that's usually not what's going to be happening in the middle of the playoff series, but with with people that are not seeing the Hawks for the 85th time this year, like we are on this podcast. But here we are, and the Hawks. It's just at the end of the day, it's a one-game loss, and it does not mean the Hawks are dead in the series. It probably hurts their chances because it's just a loss, and that matters in a small sample size. But going from minus 1,000 to minus 3,000 in one game is an overreaction, and we'll see how much that matters based on Tuesday. And then the Hawks, of course, come home for Game 3 on Friday evening at Sanford Marina. All right, that's it for me on today's podcast. Again, please forgive the slight delay in publishing the podcast. Hopefully you understand why. We'll have more content. I'm hoping for another show between now and Game 2. So at the very latest, we'll be back after Game 2, but hopefully something in between there. Please subscribe to the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Please follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me on Twitter at BT Rowland. Follow my written work over at patreon.com/BT Rowland. We'll see you next time. I really appreciate you listening, and we'll check back with you at the end of the weekend, or at least, at the very least, after the game on Tuesday.